The following program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.
This Social Security measure gives at least some protection
for anybody to hand this out. We're asking for a chance to have the people who will receive the benefit to earn their way. The same principle established under the Social Security system in this country.
It is no longer acceptable to discuss women's rights as separate from human rights.
I know we can come together to face down the challenges of our own time.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to Us Democrats here on Access Nashua. Welcome back. I'm Dave Tenza, Chair of the Nashua Democratic City Committee. We have a very special guest today, Diane Sheehan, who is an alderwoman here in the city of Nashua, but more importantly today, a candidate for Executive Council District 5. Diane, thank you so much for coming back on the show and being our guest.
Thank you for the invitation. Happy to be here again.
Absolutely. So, as I mentioned, a lot of people know you as being on the Board of Alderman here in Nashua. You've done that for a number of years now, not too many, but you've certainly made a name for yourself doing that. How did you make the decision to run for the Executive Council seat?
Oh, I was quite surprised, as everyone was, that Deb would be not running again this term. And having served on the Board of Alderman during her opponent's tenure, I saw how difficult he made it for New Hampshire in general, but Nashua in particular, to move forward on the rail feasibility study. Some other things happened that were also, as a woman, alarming to me, but the not returning phone calls, things like that, really had me worried. Who are we going to have to run? And then the phone started ringing and people started saying, you should run. Think about running. And so when enough people did it, I said, okay, give me about a week and a half, figure this out. And so I did a lot of research, asked everybody why I shouldn't do it so that I would know what I was getting into. I knew why I would want to do it. I wanted to know why maybe I shouldn't do it. And I checked with legal to make sure it was something I could do concurrently as an alderman, because that I did on purpose. You know, that was my intention, 3 terms ago when I first ran. So I found that I can. And so as soon as I decided, yes, this is something I'm going to do, I said, oh no, I've wasted 10 days. I need to get busy, because it also occurred to me that people run about a year in advance. So there was some, trying to get my feet under me and get things rolling, and they are now.
In the Executive Council, everyone knows, a lot of people know Deb Pignatelli and all the great work she's done for Nashua and for a lot of people in Nashua. But I'm not sure a lot of people understand exactly what the Executive Council does. Would you just take a couple minutes to explain that for people?
Absolutely. It is a part of the executive branch, which means it is not a legislative role, but it's from the executive. So anything that our governor does that is spending money over $10,000 needs to be approved by a 5-member council. So she needs to have 3 votes of support in order to approve that. Appointments and commission placements, directors, things like that need to go through an approval process as well. And there are other features like, or functions like pardons. There is also something that has been an interest for me over my whole tenure, which is transportation. The 10-year transportation improvement plan, which is something that, as a person in Nashua in Ward 3, was very aware of the whole, we need a bridge, not here, okay, we have an east-west problem, how do you deal with this? Clearly it isn't just contained in Nashua. Hudson had concerns, Litchfield, they're trapped. We have a lot of cut-through traffic with Merrimack, and 101 is choked. So I got involved with the Nashua Regional Planning Commission, and that's probably where I started spending the most time with Deb, because she had that responsibility. She went to all the hearings and things like that. So I've been kind of up to speed on at least the last 6 years and what's been going on as far as, this is our plan, this is your funding. Now this is our plan. Now here's your funding. So, you know, there's an evolution there. And I think understanding what the important goals are is something that's better to understand coming into that job than trying to understand the long-range implications.
And a lot of the issues you point out with that are make it a difficult environment for government, for business to operate in, you know, which is tough for us here in Nashville. Obviously, rail is probably the biggest issue, one of the biggest issues that we are facing, or our biggest challenge in the state going forward.
Yeah, it's our single largest economic opportunity.
Is to bring rail into Nashua.
It is the game changer, and it really needs to be looked at well. I think we've seen it coming to other places that have used some unusual ways to bring it in with transit-oriented design, using bringing in private partnerships, private-public partnerships to do station work. Different things have really worked, and the Cape Flyer has been wildly successful and, wait for it, profitable. So, you know, when you have a situation where people just can't get there and it's a time thing, that's when people really want rail, and we have that issue.
Sure. And you mentioned the Cape Flyer. For people who don't know, that's the rail, the line that goes down to, is it Bourne now, or it goes into Hyannis?
You just go right over the bridge. You know, you fly down to the Cape, and you're not sitting in traffic for hours and hours.
Sure. Well, you mentioned before that you sought out the advice of whether or not you could serve concurrently on the Board of Alderman. And as executive counselor, if elected. Obviously, that was a big, important decision, and they said that you could serve in both capacities. So,
if I was mayor, I could not, and I'm not mayor, and I'm very grateful for that right now. And you know, that's where it crosses the line of. But I think that your perspective in either role helps you in the other role. And
how so?
Well. Okay, for example, when Bill O'Brien is talking about how much he cut and how much money he saved and what a great job he did, I know that that translated to Nashua to about $27 million that the local taxpayers had to make up. So when something is coming through, I can see, well, how is that going to affect our ability to do a budget, which is what we're in the middle of doing right now in the city. Also aware of grants and different programs coming in like that. I am on Human Affairs, so I've done a lot of work with grants and the nonprofits. I think both the perspectives will be useful. And wouldn't it be great to have an executive counselor at every Board of Alderman meeting, and you know, somebody from the city up there? So I think, you know, you wear the right hat when you are where you are, but to have that knowledge base available, I think is very good for everybody.
So let's talk a little bit more about the role that the Executive Council plays, because you talked about from 2010 to 2012 when there was a Republican for District 5 and they had a majority on the council. From 2012 to 2014, Governor Hassan has had 3 Democrats on the 5-person council, so she's had a majority, which is obviously the position you're running for in Executive Council 5 is very important to keep that majority. What kind of, if it becomes a Republican majority again on the Executive Council, what kind of contracts can they stop or hold up? Or
Medicare expansion. Rail will be acted on. It should be, the feasibility study should be returned in the fall, so that will be acted on. And that is something that really has the most opportunity to grow us. We have the Health and Human Services was decimated under O'Brien. And if we see those sort of cuts again, I mean, in Nashua, we had to put together our own temporary CHINS program. You know, we saw intervention programs cut. We saw people being denied care for the mental health. And what happened was, and we knew it was going to happen in the city, gee, we're going to have more trouble with drugs and people having addiction issues. We're going to have a rise in crime, and then we're going to have, you know, the related fallout from that. And look what's happened.
Sure.
You know, it's not rocket science. If you're investing in making sure that that's a minimized issue, you're going to reap the rewards. And now we're adding police, we're adding, and so did that really save us any money? Did it add to our quality of life? Did it help the people that have needs? So
right.
It looked like it saved money to some people until you peel the onion a little bit and you can see.
Right, and certainly, last year in the city of Nashua, there was or even earlier this year, all the robberies that occurred, and the chief is out there saying they're all, majority of them are drug related, which I think people can easily believe.
Right.
So especially for a city like Nashua, those cuts have real consequences. Maybe not in a town like Mount Vernon, where Bill O'Brien comes from, but the big cities, Manchester, Nashua, even Keene, Portsmouth, can feel those cuts. Even in education, we're dealing now in the city with more cuts to education, and unfortunately, it's all interrelated. So.
It is. That's where you make up the money when you have a budget shortfall.
Right.
You go to the biggest bucket of money, and that is the educational funding. And we are kind of close to the bone in that regard. So we need to make sure that we have what we need for the students that are there. And I think that we are, I would say in the bone already on some issues. So.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. You've been campaigning for a couple months now. It's the end of July as we're talking. What are the issues that people come to you with, or they are most important to them in this election?
Rail is generally what I'm hearing from people who are younger and from people in business. For older people, they're concerned with healthcare access and making sure that the health care that we've put in place stays there and that we improve the access points. And I think that the Affordable Care Act, was the first step, and we need to then improve it. We need to have competition. We didn't have a lot of competition for small businesses to begin with in the healthcare market, which was part of why our costs were higher than in other communities. So anything we can do to increase some competition there will help to bring those costs down. But I think people are afraid that we're going to start taking steps backwards with access to women's health issues as well, with what happened with the Planned Parenthood defunding. And for a lot of places, that is the primary place that people get screenings for mammograms and for cervical cancer. And that impacts lower income households more than anybody else. And there are places where that's the only place to go and get your first screening.
Sure.
And that's an important early intervention, because the later you wait, the harder it is to recover. My mother had breast cancer and died about 5 years after her diagnosis. Luckily, she was on the tamoxifen study, and it helped, but she was diagnosed at stage 4. If it had gone earlier, and so I know that that's the most important thing, is to find it early, find it early, find it early.
Sure, sure. And, so it seems like, you're talking about so many important issues to voters, Democrats, but, women voters of either party. How exactly, how does the executive counselor get involved in everything from rail to Planned Parenthood, and why isn't it the, how is it they even get involved? It seems like those are more legislative decisions.
They're contracts that come in. So for the health care, there were contracts that are done. For the rail feasibility study, whatever is going to need to be taken action on, there's going to be something contracted for it. So even if everybody votes yes, but there's no money that's released for it, it doesn't do us any good. So these are things that can really be a linchpin for a lot of important issues.
Sure. And so, again, for instance, 2010 to 2012, there was money, where the state was asking for money to just do a study on rail in the Nashua region. In that, it was that, even the study that was held up because the person in there or the Republican majority at that point wouldn't even spend money to.
And we had it. We had the
Right.
money. It was a match, and it was budgeted. And we had said it was a capital corridor study, so it was to look at Nashua or Manchester or Concord and figure out the feasibility of it. And the response was, we've done a study before. We know what the answers were. Well, you weren't looking at passenger and freight. You weren't looking at $5 a gallon, which is a driver. You weren't looking at necessarily the traffic conditions that you are now. It's completely different just changing the $5 a gas scenario because it's a break point at a certain point for people to start using mass transit.
Sure.
And you know, everything so far is pointing to really better results than they had anticipated, including ridership. So conservative estimates have been 3,100, but there are numbers in the report that indicate it could be much higher than that. So these are the things that, you know, in business, you wouldn't say, let me look at a report I did 15 years ago and decide whether or not I should make a large investment or not.
Sure.
You'd want current market conditions. So that's important to move forward.
Sure. And so, you know, in reviewing these contracts, can you just tell the viewers, you know, a little bit about your background
Sure.
in business in case they're not aware of that?
Sure.
and what-
I mean, we do this on the Board of Alderman as well, but I have a professional background where I did that. I was an indirect distribution manager for a telecommunications company, and before that I worked for Pitney Bowes and the state of New Hampshire, and we had contracts, bids, you know, so I've had to
Sure.
bid on things, I've had to write contracts between different parties, I've had to deal with the PUC and different entities to try to make sure that what I need and what you need are going to match up together, because sometimes I know what I need, you know what you need, we've both covered, but they're missing each other. So knowing how to read the contract and make sure that all the parts that are supposed to be there are there. So it's something that I do have a background in. As far as appointments and such, I mean, I've interviewed hundreds and hundreds of people before, so I've also served on the personnel committee in Nashua, so it's, I think, the same thing, but at a different office type of thing. It's still your skill in doing that, and knowing how to read between lines is important.
Sure. And you know, one of the most important functions, I think, of the governor and of the executive council is appointment of judges in the state. You know, I'm an attorney. I do trial work here in Nashua, and you know, I don't think people realize the impact that the judges can have on the community. You know, especially we've had great judges at the district court level recently here in Nashua with Judge Bamberger, who's done a lot of work with youth in the city. Judge Leary has done a fantastic job with different populations, and even Superior Court judges are fantastic. We're really fortunate to have a judiciary down here that I think is really wants to see the community do well. Have you thought about, you know, what you look for when the governor is recommending certain people for judicial appointments?
I think I would be looking for not somebody who's ideological. I know that that was an issue also under Wheeler, and that gave me some red flags. You need to be looking at someone's professional experience and how professional they are in making decisions and not being driven by whatever position it is, be it about women's issues or gun rights or what have you. There shouldn't be a litmus test for judges. It should be whether they're able to apply the law in a consistent way, and I am concerned that that has been done in the past. And judges leave a very, very long legacy, especially the higher up you get in court. So that is something that, you know, on a federal level is the biggest thing a president can do. And I think, you know, that our governor takes that part of the job extremely seriously, and you need to, especially in court. You know, it goes up the chain.
Sure.
So it becomes obvious if there's been an issue at the lower court, and it ties the process up for everybody else who needs to be able to use the courts.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, it's an important job. I think the governor, both Governor Lynch and Governor Hassan, have done a very great job picking judges, and maybe that's self-serving of me to say since I need to appear in front of them, but I'll go ahead and say it anyways. You know, it's so you're going to stay on as alderwoman if you're elected. Do you see that there's a huge difference, or is there any conflict, do you think, in serving both roles?
The conflict that Deb has had have been related to her family's, you know, her husband's a lawyer.
Sure.
And I don't have that issue. My husband works for a private company. If they were going to bid on some equipment for the state, which is highly unlikely, I would recuse myself, but I think that I have a lot less conflict of interest. I don't benefit from something coming to Nashua necessarily, so it's not, you know, anybody who would be up there that's serving from Nashua. Is that a conflict of interest? If somebody's serving from Milford, does that make it a conflict of interest? It doesn't. So that's, like I said before, it's a way to do both jobs, I think, better. And one's at night, one's during the day. I am a person now who, this is all I do, so I am available during the day for constituent service, and I enjoy having good information to make good decisions, and the best way to do that is spending time with people, having them direct you to sources so you can educate yourself. I don't want to walk into the office, should I get it, and feel like I'm drinking from a fire hose. I want to hit the ground running and have a good understanding, so I am doing a lot of reading and reaching out to people and getting informed about what are their concerns.
Great. You know, one of the issues that we see every election cycle, and we deal with as Democrats, is this issue of an income tax in New Hampshire. I know that Governor Hassan has, you know, said a million times that she's in no way for an income tax. Do you support the governor? Would you support her in that position, or do you have a different position?
I have seen my Republican opponent use it to beat opponents before, and I will tell you that all the people I talk to are pretty much one or two issue voters, but you change everybody into a one issue voter on that subject, because 70% of the people are dead set against it, and the other 30% really think that that's the solution. So you want to lose the election really fast, campaign on we need an income tax, and he will hold people's feet to the fire on that. He did it to Donnelly Lozo. She voted for something once, and you know, we all know how that played out.
Sure.
And we had Executive Councilor Wheeler. So, you know, that, I think, when you keep in mind the fact that we have established a whole system around not having one for our revenue sources, if you change it and add it, two things are going to happen. One, we're going to lose a lot of the people that come here for that reason. And two, you end up with not really a reduction in other taxes. We've seen it in other parts of the country where they've added it. It didn't go down. It didn't reduce anything else. It becomes, oh, look, we have more money. You know, we're very careful that we invest very carefully, and I think what you will see is once the economy starts to recover, that is a self-fixing problem as well. And bringing rail in here and having more businesses eat up some of that rather than just the third, these are the things that you fix, then you don't need to do that. So it's important to have people be comfortable with the fact that that isn't a risk. And we were already seeing it on TV. I turned on the TV today and I saw one for somebody running for Congress, and I said, what's next? An income tax for New Hampshire? And you say, but she's not going to be in New Hampshire. Why is that even? And it's like, it's the red flag. You know where they're going with this in the next election.
Sure, sure. And it's a, you know, no matter how much the governor or other Democrats say it, you know, it's an issue that gets raised every election cycle. And I'm not even sure that the Executive Council, that would be a legislative change, but nevertheless, you support the governor and her
Yes.
no income tax pledge. You know, we only have a couple minutes left. Is there anything else you'd like to say, like voters to know if they want to get more information about you?
Sure. I think, you know, the thing to consider is this is an off-cycle election, which means we lose half the half the Democrats in the primary and half of them at the general election. And 70% of Republicans say that they're ready to vote in November, 50% of Democrats. We need to have a strong, moderate person who can stand up to, if it's Wheeler or if it's someone else, and be able to do that. And if you'd like to find out why am I moderate, why, you know, what have I done, I do have a website. It's dianesheehan.org, and there's a lot of information there. And I'm also on Facebook, Diane Sheehan for Executive Council, or Alderman Diane Sheehan, and you can scroll way back and see, you know, in the open, different conversations that we've had about different issues. And I think it's a good way to meet people in a very transparent way so everyone's on the same page.
Great. Great. Well, Diane, thank you again for coming on today and talking with us. We wish you the best of luck in your election. And just so everyone knows, the primary, this is the primary election. What's the date?
September 9th.
September 9th. Okay.
Yes, and Ward 3, Ward 5, and Ward 1 will have different polling locations. So as it gets closer, we'll make sure that that's at the top of the website, but trying to move them out of schools as much as possible. If it works well this time, there'll be more effort to do that.
Sure. Great. Well, thank you very much, and congratulations on your decision to run, and we wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
This is Dave Tenza. Thank you for watching Us Democrats. If you'd like any more information about the National Democratic City Committee, you can always find us at www.nationaldemocrats.com. Thank you for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Thank you.
This Social Security measure gives at least some protection.
For anybody to hand this out, we're asking for a chance to have the people who will receive the benefit to earn their way. The same principle established under the Social Security system in the 30s.
It is no longer acceptable to discuss women's rights as separate from human rights.
I know we can come together to face down the challenges of our own time.
The preceding program was provided by an independent producer solely responsible for its content. The opinions expressed do not necessarily represent the views of this station, its staff, board of directors, or underwriters.